Hello, everyone. We're your hosts, Beth Moore,
and Bridget Querns.
and welcome to Click Moments and Passionate Pursuits, The Unfolding, where intuitively guided conversations are followed with feral faith, enthusiasm, and joy, bringing new insights, inspiration, and perspectives along the way. And today, our topic is your intuition is telling you something, always. And this has been a topic. Intuition, obviously, is something that we talk about often, and it is something that's extremely important and interesting to the two of us. But for those of you that may be coming into intuition and new to it, we're just going to briefly start with describing what intuition is. We're going to jump into it and we're going to start talking about all the different ways that intuition talks to us, but then also just give you some perspectives of how to think about it, and maybe you'll find that your intuition has been talking to you for some time and you didn't necessarily know what that was. So the way that I look at intuition, and I'm sure Bridget will explain more about how she looks at it, but the definition that I use is our intuition is a two-way communication system between ourselves and the universe. So it's the way that the universe speaks to us. It's like our language between us. So what I love about this is it doesn't matter what your nationality, it is regardless of what your culture, your gender, your age, whoever you are, it's hardwired within us. It is something within you that is speaking to you. And often it's subtle and sometimes and there's this element of, that wasn't me. This distinctly feels separate from me. And so that's what we're talking about in this conversation, that part of you inside of you that feels like, and you know innately that it's coming from within you, but it's not from you. So there's this duality and this distinction, but yet this inclusion that resides together.
Yeah, so when we talked about this a while back, the image that I immediately got was I used to go fishing and sailing with my father, but when we would go fishing, we had this. I mean, this was back when this technology was very new. It's far more advanced now. There's just cameras, but we had this Garmin. It was called like the Fish Finder, and it would produce these little images, like black and white pixely images of the bottom of whatever body of water we were on. And then if there were like little spots above that, we would know that there was something in the water. And if they were moving, then it was a pretty good indication that there were fish beneath us and we should stop there and drop our lines in. So this came to me as sort of an illustration of what our intuition is like, and I call it our soul positioning system. So it's in my mind, it's like we are on this sort of mission, like this learning mission, like we're here receiving and learning and growing, and we're feeding back information, but it's like a two-way communication. So we're feeding back this learning and information to our higher selves, or to our souls, or to our guides, or whomever is on the other end. But we're also at the same time not cut off from that in terms of being able to receive information to help us figure out, okay, what did I come here to do? Like, what am I supposed to be learning, or how am I supposed to be growing? Like, what did I plan for myself through this incarnation? So I think of it as this soul positioning system that helps us constantly both send out and receive signals as to what is it that I'm doing. Like I'm in constant motion. I'm constantly moving towards something or through something. And therefore, when I think of intuition, it's not just this one time, like I'm sending out a question or a prayer or a request, and I'm receiving, and that's it. It's a constant like feedback loop. It's constant communication between myself and like higher self, universe, guides. And something I want to talk about that I get really excited about, and I'm going to ask you this in the form of a question, is it's like our intuition sort of speaks different languages or shows up differently for different people. And I really want to get an idea of like, what is that like for you? Like, what language does your intuition speak?
Mm, that's a really good question. Even though I use that in the definition, I haven't like necessarily pictured it that way. Number one, it speaks. m- I'm like very sentient. I feel things. So, part of this is as an empath, somebody who identifies as an empath, I sense emotions and energy and frequency outside of me. And it doesn't mean that I'm always interpreting it correctly, but I sense it and I feel it, right? So I think that is also a way that the universe speaks to me, but instead of it being something like with other people that is outside of me, I can feel the energy between us outside of me. With the universe, it's like it comes within me. It doesn't, it's not, it's distinctly not outside of me. It's not touching the surface of my skin. It's not being absorbed from the outside through my skin into me as an experience. But it is literally first and foremost something that I experience inside myself that gives the quality of being me, but yet is distinctly coming through me,
Mm,
right? So it's just a slight nuance, a subtle shift between this is me, oh no, and this is something coming through me. And if it's
mhm,
not something in front of me that I'm experiencing, like it's a distinctly different quality to come from, so be sourced from inside me. So it's almost like somebody put it's almost like somebody put like a phone or somebody put some sort of commute like something inside me and they're just talking, right? And so I'm
mm,
experiencing it because we're speaking the same language, so it's translators on, right? And when I'm really 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 dialed in and I've got all the distractions around, especially after meditation or after I've been playing or completely relaxed and in this space of emotional regulation and where I'm just like present. It's almost like it's on full blast. Like that I can hear it. Like
mm,
it's a feeling first and foremost that is translated into my tactile senses. So it's
mm,
like it comes in through the feeling and then it's like it activates my tactile senses and I begin to interpret what I'm experiencing through that, as well as sometimes just words. So I would imagine that in other people, if they're from France or if they're from, Spain, they're hearing this through their own written and verbal language. But I'm getting it like sometimes I'll get words because I'm interpreting feeling inside of me with my senses
mhm.
and then I'm feeling that and putting it through language and then it's beginning to be a message.
Yeah.
Does that resonate?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
But how does that same question for you? I would be interested if it's similar or if you have distinct different
Yeah,
ways that you experience it.
so for me, it feels not pre-verbal, but like super verbal.
Mm,
So like it's transcended the need for language and meaning to be wrapped around it. So when like when I take action, like aligned action based on it, or when I translate, for example, when we're speaking and I translate something that's come through into words so I can then give it to you or to someone else or to like our listeners, then I'm diluting it. Like it comes in this distilled version that's very potent, but anything that I do to translate it is going to dilute it and make it far less potent, which is really difficult for me because I'm a writer. And so I have to understand that this language, any words I put around it are going to minimize it in a certain sense.
It's going to be lost in translation.
Yeah, some of it is, yeah, inevitably. Because it's like the way that it feels to me is like the universe and I are having some beautiful telepathic ongoing conversation. And oh, and this was a question I had for you, but for me, it's like if I choose to, I can tune into that and I could just go about my entire day in that conversation. But I can also tune out of it, knowing that it's still there, and I can tune back in at any time I want to. But I think a lot of us have gotten really good at tuning it out because intuition isn't going to tell you what you want to hear. It's not going to please you by telling you the things that you're hoping for. Intuition's going to be only truthful and only honest all of the time. So sometimes what you hear or what you feel may be challenging. It's always for your highest good, though, always for your highest good, but it can be challenging.
Okay, I have 3 different things to say, and they're in different directions. So I'm going to start with where you originally were, which was,
Okay.
I think beautiful, how you described it with that it was super verbal versus, pre-verbal. And you mentioned diluting it in the image that I got because I feel like sometimes images can be really helpful for us to be able to understand concepts.
Let's see
And
if we got the
so
same image. Okay.
so I was thinking about watercolors. I was thinking about like if you take your brush and you dip it into a watercolor pre the water, or even just with
Mm-hmm.
just a smidge of water, you're getting such a potent, strong color. But then when
Mm-hmm.
you put it in like the water with the
Dip it into
color,
the
and then you dip it in there, and then you keep putting water in, it's so faint and
Yep.
and it's still beautiful.
It's
It's
still
still
there.
color. It's still
Yeah.
color, and it's
Yep.
got water, and water is life-giving force. So it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like it's the fluid that water is almost like a conduit, like we're that water, right? Like it
It's
comes
the
through us,
medium. It's
the
the
medium.
medium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the image that I got. Was that the
Mm.
image you had?
Yeah, that was exactly the image I had. Yeah.
And then the second one was, as you said, it's like, that we can choose to tune in or tune out, um, but it's ever present, right? It's
Yeah.
always there. And I was thinking about how, number one, when we know that this is true, how could we ever be how could we ever not feel love? How could we ever not feel belonging? How could we ever be bored or feel alone when
Yeah.
there's this amazing it's like having the most amazing person in the world right in front of you at all time, but like within you and going, I'm bored. It's like, wait, the most interesting person in the world is within you. And it has the impact to shape the lens of you, like how you see the world. And it also, you're always, all you have to do is lean in and tune in and have this amazing conversation with this ever-present being that knows you better than anybody. So you're trying to find friends and develop relationships, but from my experience, I remember Rob Bell, who we've talked about often. He talks about something he said one time. I was thinking about my relationship with the divine,
Mm.
and I was like, wow. I say it's the most important relationship in my life, but how much time do I spend on it? I was like, I used to, when I was a kid, go to church, on Sundays. I don't do that anymore. So I started finding a spiritual community online that resonated with me. But then I started in between often connecting. And I was like, oh, well, if the universe is a person or an entity, it wants me to spend time with it. Wants me to spend time with it. And the more I spend time with the universe, it's like that language, intuition, becomes
Mm.
stronger.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I wasn't really I'm never I probably won't be ever fluent until I join Source, but it's like I'm developing a proficiency more and more as I'm like constantly, I'm immersed when I'm communing, right, with the divine.
Yeah.
And I have one more thing to say, but I'll wait. I'll say it later if you have something to add to this, like, because it's just like I feel like you might have something to riff on.
Yeah, well, I'm just running with the idea that the more time you spend with the divine, the more this intuition becomes apparent and present. And the way that I can best describe that is I live in a place where the air is often very humid, and it's hard to explain what that is unless someone's experienced it. So, like dry air, you can very much feel the difference. You can feel the difference when you walk through it. You can feel the difference when you breathe it in. And humid air has this quality of being thick, but you can't see that it's any more thick than dry air. And you can't necessarily see, I mean, unless you're like in the middle of a cloud in an airplane and you start to see the water droplets dripping down the window.
Mhm.
But it's not like I can walk outside and go like this and like have water on my skin, but I can feel the quality of the air around me being thick. And that's what my experience with the divine is like now. Now that I've been really intentional about cultivating it and wanting that intuition and that conversation to be ever present, I say my experience is thick with the presence of God. And that's what intuition feels like for me now. It's like just invite the conversation to be a part of every experience. Um, like taking a walk and looking at a tree or a plant. Like we both have this love for nature, but it's just there's just something about like when I look at a plant and then I look a little deeper and then I like feel into it and then I have a moment where I'm just taking it in, and as we read in God an Autobiography, it's taking me in as much as I'm taking it in. Like there's this recognition of the other, and then you just have this really intensely present moment with this being that is part of creation, that is all part of God, it's all within God. So it's like a part of God observing another part of God and recognizing that that's what's going on. And then it becomes really profound. And, this happens like when I'm walking my dog and my neighbor walks by me and they're like, hey. And I'm like, hi. Because I'm having a moment with the tree that I'm standing next to. But
Mhm.
yeah, oh my God, it's just so beautiful. And how could you not want that to be what your experience is like? I can't imagine not having that be part of my experience every day.
So this is really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. It was like when you were talking, what I felt was, how sometimes people have those experiences where maybe they've had to lean in a little bit more to the divine than they normally do. And all of a sudden, something happens in their experience, and they have this moment of awe, and they go, I feel like God sees me.
Hmm.
I feel like the divine sees me. And it's that moment, it's so emotional every time it happens. The first time for somebody where they feel like they're not just somebody, a number, but they're intimately known by God. Like God is actually truly like in like observing them. And what you just described reminded me of that moment where when God, when we realize the presence of God within us, and that it's this constant seeing you because of what you described, this
Mm.
communication system, right? So the soul positioning, when the universe is constantly seeing us, there's constantly this, we may catch it on occasion. God sees me, but God's constantly like, that one, oh my gosh, look at what they're doing. Like God's constantly like aware. And us then knowing that God is within us and that we mimic often as creators what God creates, like we're given that opportunity. When you or I or anyone looks at nature and takes it in with wonder and awe,
Mm.
we're in essence doing what God does to us. We're like extending to that beautiful flower. We're like incarnate going, oh, look at you. Oh, wow. And so it's like that's where simply God becomes present in this world through us doing the very thing that God does to us.
Well, and like if our viewers haven't read God an Autobiography as Told to a Philosopher by Jerry Martin, we're just going to strongly recommend this book. But I'm going to reference something that God says in this book, and that is that God needs us in order to embody and have that experience. Like, this is how God experiences. Like, reality needs to be embodied. God needs all of this to experience all of this, to grow and learn and become. Like, God is in a constant state of expansion and becoming. And we are part of that becoming and recognizing and experiencing. So yeah, I mean, that may be a stretch for a lot of people, but I guess the way that I understand it and the way that it makes sense to me is that if everything that we experience all emerged from one point, from one inciting moment, then we're all the same stuff. Like, we are all of the same force and matter and being. So therefore it makes sense that we all have that like divine spark within us.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So, first of all, going back to kind of the watercolor, like what you're describing with this expansion that we all, like what you're describing to me, I was thinking about like we're all artists, like, and art is becoming more and more um interesting to me and a part of me. And but what I love about artists is they're, by definition, they're constantly creating. Like, you can say that in all fields, people are creating, right? But there's something about the broad brushstroke and what comes out of artists. And the more artists I get to know, the more they talk about this moment of inspiration where something outside of them, distinctly different from them, that was not in them before, comes through them, and they are invited to bring it into the world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it exists already within them, but it's just in their mind, it's in their body, and it's invisible because it's only seen through their tactile senses. But when they accept the invitation and they create and they bring it out, it's like, to me, I have goosebumps. Like every single artist who creates is offering you a glimpse of the divine, is offering you
Yes.
a glimpse of the universe. This is why I think art is so magical to people. It's not just the mediums, and it's not but it's like oftentimes we're fascinated by a particular person. It's the lens of that person that's coming through the work, but it's them tapped into the universe and saying, here, like this is what I'm seeing. The energy of that person and the universe is wrapped up in that creation.
Hmm.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, oh man, we're gonna go so far into different fields during this conversation.
That's what we
But
do.
it's like it's like I can picture right now. Okay, here's a great example. When I was a kid, I still love to listen to Beethoven. I loved to listen to Beethoven. And I would hear in my head, not when I was listening to Beethoven, but when it was completely silent, I would hear a full symphony orchestra playing a piece that I'd never heard before. I could pinpoint each different instrument. I could tell what the different sections were doing. I could feel the movement of the music. Like there would be compositions, full compositions in my head. Where is that coming from? It wasn't something that I'd ever experienced before. It just dropped in and was present in its entirety. And I could hear it play through in my head. Now, if I were Beethoven or Mozart or Bach or Chopin, I would have written that piece. Like I would have brought that piece into the world as a creative offering. I think that's intuition. That is divine voice. Divine voice speaks different languages depending on how we express. So God's not going to speak a language to us that we aren't capable of expressing and bringing into the world. And creation is just the manifestation of desire into the material.
Mm, mhm.
All desire can be boiled down to the idea that we just want to bring something new into the world.
Mhm.
And that is creation. And then that creation becomes material. And there is a necessary step in the process, which is, before I said it's diluting it, but it's also embodying it.
Mhm.
It's wrapping material, it's wrapping flesh, it's wrapping words or paint or sound, it's wrapping something tactile around this idea. That's a necessary step. Like
Mhm.
all of those compositions that I heard in my head never got written.
Mm.
So do they exist? Yeah, they existed. They're very much real, but they weren't ever embodied. And
Right.
that's, yeah, go.
And I wonder if, like, Melissa or Liz Gilbert talks about this, right? She talks about how when an idea comes to you, it passes by. And this is why artists describe, like, I'm catching it by the tail, and I'm like, writers say that I'm trying to wrangle it in and get it out really quick, because otherwise
Yeah.
it's going to move on to someone else. It
Yep.
is it is literally a form that's not embodied, but the question is like, it can move to somebody else if you're not going to bring it into the world. It wants to be birthed, and it's invisible, and it becomes visible through this body, like through this
Mhm.
form. Like you said, it becomes material, but it becomes material through us because we're already material. And so it's like if you imagine a lily pad, and something is floating, and all of a sudden the wind catches it, and it can blob onto this, it can land here, and it can be material as part of this, or it can dissolve and go into the water, but it can go to a lot of different sources. But if your material catches that material, it becomes part of you. So these ideas can become physically part of you, and you can create it a form. You can give it form. You can actually take images because it goes through your tactile senses, and you can interpret it. And what's interesting is that you interpret it uniquely to you. And so this is where an
Mm-hmm.
artist can have an image or an idea of what that they want to create, and somebody could say, "Hey, somebody create this. This is what I'm seeing." And 10 different artists will create it 10 different ways,
Yeah.
right? Because of the unique nature of who we are. This is why, like, there's probably 7,000 people out there, 20,000 people out there talking about intuition. But not everybody's going to talk about intuition like we talk about intuition. So who does that resonate with? And somebody else is going to be like, this
Mm-hmm.
person talks. So it's a form of creation by trying to put words to something that is elusive, but yet it comes from
Mm-hmm.
beyond, and it's giving language to what's out there so that we can have an opportunity to embody that in this world, that we can be more of the universe. You got a book that came up, a
Yeah,
passage.
well, many. No, my thought was just that why is it that God needs God's story to be told in so many different ways? Why are there so many different traditions? And why is it that God continues to show up and say, tell my story, tell my story, tell my story, tell my story? All these different people are telling this story. Okay. You got excited. You did
Yeah,
your
I'm
little
just
happy
yeah,
dance.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm excited to riff on this. This is awesome. When you're done, I'm
Yeah,
in.
it's
Tap me
yeah.
in.
Yeah, no, that's where I just wanted to open that area of discussion because it's like, well, if garbage truck is very exciting, apparently.
Mm. So I'm gonna go. I'm going in. Okay. So I think in part, and this is such a big question, there's like so many ways to go with this, but in part, I think that we were when I grew up, I was given the message that there was one way to think about the divine, and there was the right way and the wrong way, right? Which never really made sense to me because wow, like if God creates everybody and he creates somebody in this remote village somewhere over here and they don't have access to my story, they're not divine because they don't have access to this, but yet they're having their own experience with the divine. And that's valid. There's many different paths in my mind to reintegrate to source. But to me, it's about what we've been talking about through the book, God, the autobiography. It talks about expansion. And so,
Mm.
since there is, the universe, like you can see back here, so this is the beginning.
Yeah.
But really, the beginning was, like you said, this point, and then it was like, this is just the moment right after that. But then it's expanded and it's expanded and it's expanded and it's expanded and it's expanded. And here we are in this little part of this one universe doing our little thing, building, planting trees and planting flowers and making the universe amazing. And we're sharing emotions and experiences and feelings and buildings and all these different things. And we're part of that expansion. But if that's an expression of God and God is everywhere all the time, then as God's expanding, the universe needs to go through us as an extension of the universe so that it can keep expanding in all the unique ways that all say God or the universe. You're on mute.
No, I'm just listening.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
enjoying where you're going.
Yeah. I'm just I just think about the value, and I feel like it's like when you go into a museum, it's the difference between just looking at one wing where it's,
Mm.
I mean, I love Impressionists. I love Impressionists because it's not specifically clear and it allows for you to use your creativity to decipher what's happening. But I also like to go over here, and I like to see some Vermeer, and I want to be able to, go over to here and see some Rembrandt, and I want to go over here and, see the mummies. And everybody has, like, it's all art. Just because one part of it resonates with you, that is a unique clue to your unique expression. Maybe it's like if you walk through a museum and there's one wing that gets your attention, it's saying something to you about you,
Mm.
but it doesn't invalidate the rest of the experience of the museum, and it doesn't negate the beauty that's there, because there's somebody else in that wing just as enamored as you are where you are. And it's all valid and it's all good, because if we don't, there's nobody, like, think of it this way, like, if there's nobody to witness the beauty, it's like, if it's all God, don't you want somebody else witnessing that beauty, because you're over here witnessing this beauty and you want it all to be validated?
That's why people will say, well, if God created, like, why did God need to create humans? Like, why is that necessary? And it's exactly what you just said. Like, we're here to witness.
Mhm.
There is, it's necessary. Like, love can't exist without relationship.
Mhm.
Like, there has to be it is going to birth and create something. It has to. It's
Mhm.
necessary.
Mhm.
So yeah, like, we are here to witness. We're here to emote. We're here to feel and to sense and to have all of these experiences. And the more that I stay in this intuitive flow and presence and space, the more I realize it can all coexist together. All
Mhm.
of these things can coexist together. Even the things that before I was told, like, oh, well, you definitely can't mix a plank of wood with some quilting and watercolor all in one. Like, that, those aren't supposed to be together. Like, it's all starting to feel a lot more fluid, and um it's just like it's all part of the conversation, all in one place.
Mhm.
Is that making
Mhm.
sense?
It does
Okay.
make sense. Yeah, it does make sense. And it kind of brought me to a point that was that third point earlier that I was saving till later. It kind of brought me
Mm.
back around to that. Um, you said our intuition doesn't tell what you want to hear, and you said it. Did you say that it loves the truth, or it
Yeah.
loves all? Yeah.
It yeah.
And so what I was thinking about with this was, with what you just said, yes and no. If intuition does tell you what you want to hear, if what you
Mhm.
hear happens to be true to you.
Mhm.
So it will tell you what you want to hear, but yet it almost gives me a real peace to know that if there's something that I want and my intuition is telling me that this isn't for me, but my mind is trying to convince me that it is, I can actually step back and trust that it's not for me. If
Mm.
my intuition,
Say that one more time. That was really good.
okay, so if my intuition is telling me something that is in opposition to what I believe that I want in my life, and my mind is telling me that I want something, but my intuition is sending me different messages, and I'm overwired, like I'm, um, what's the word? Over, I'm bypassing it, right? I'm bypassing my intuition to my mind. Then I can actually step back and trust that if something is happening in my life, that God is with me all the time and it's for my greater good. And if my I can actually just step back and trust that if something that I perceive that I want that doesn't go with my intuition and it goes with my mind instead of my intuition is from God. So I can trust that even though I want it, it's not mine to have. And if
Mm,
I do try to get it and try to work that angle, then I am working an angle that is not for my highest good, that is not in my best interest. And so I will get the results from that choice because we always have choice.
mm,
But our
mhm,
intuition is telling us something that is steeped in the quality of flow and peace. And there's also this moment. I don't know if you guys like this. I would be interested in viewers. Are you experiencing this? Have you ever had this moment where you wanted something so bad and you were like, oh, so bad. And then all of a sudden you realized when you tuned into your intuition, when you tuned into yourself, when you realized the truth of what was happening, that you had this moment of there's this moment of sigh and release and peace that's really a weird quality on the other side of making things happen, maneuvering and
mm,
thinking, trying to process. And then all of a sudden, just with what you said, the truth, when you just accept the truth, there is some quality of that kind of sets you like on a creative path that is more aligned with this higher self and this it's like now you're back online, right? There's this sense of being back online or I'm receiving the
yeah.
signals now. I may have had them blocked for a while, but now I'm receiving. And there's a peaceful quality in that shift within yourself. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. I've had this experience in both. Okay, so I'm going to talk about different experiences of wanting things. So I've had experiences of wanting things that I thought I really wanted, and I wasn't clear on why it was that I wanted that thing. So we've talked about it being really important when you are trying to attract something or trying to manifest something, getting crystal clear on what it is that you want and why it is that you want it. And I think this is the reason. So, like, for example, during COVID, I picked up a drinking habit that was probably not healthy. And I think a lot of us did. And it wasn't necessarily that it was bordering on like alcoholism, but it wasn't healthy. Like it was a daily habit that was not good for my
Mhm.
overall health. And I would feel like I wanted a drink at the end of the day. Like I
Mhm.
needed that to wind down. I knew what I wanted, but I wasn't understanding why it was that I
Mm.
wanted that thing. And when at the beginning, at the end of last year, when I made a really clear decision to cut off that option for myself, then I could hear really clearly, oh, it wasn't that I wanted this. It was that this was coming up. And when this was coming up, it was uncomfortable. And I wanted something that would quiet it. So I didn't have to listen and I didn't have to pay attention to
Mm.
it. So that's one example of where the want, like wanting something rubbed up against what my intuition was saying. And my intuition wanted to come through and tell me something that was true for me. But
Oh, wow.
that was a really scary thing to listen to at that point.
Wow. That I have a feeling this is going to be really important for people listening. It makes sense to me in so many ways. I think about different junctures of my life, and um I think about like for people that are maybe identifying with what you're describing, there are times in your life where regardless, insert whatever, where it becomes so um when you're doing something that doesn't make you feel good or have any value add without understanding the why, then more than likely there is something within you, deep within you, that is a truth
Mm-hmm.
that is difficult to face. Like you said, it's uncomfortable. And if we look at this truth as being our intuition, it's interesting. As I was cultivating my intuition, I began to say, it's one thing to quiet myself, but it's another thing to quiet God.
Mm-hmm.
If the universe is trying to tell me something and I am fully in and I say, I'm in on whatever you want me to do here. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna keep doing the work. I'm gonna do this and that. If my intuition and some truth within me is the universe trying to tell me, hey, this is probably what would be best for you. And I'm numbing it or dulling it or quieting it or suppressing it or denying it or not picking it up, then I'm literally saying, nah, I got some other things going on. Like I had that realization at different times in my life where I was like, oh, I'm doing that. And it feels different. It actually helped me at different junctures where I wanted to make a change and I wanted to do something different, but it was a habit and it was hard to shift. And once I understood that the universe, like it would go either way with me, it would support me either way. Um, but once I understood that the universe was like, um, hey, I'm trying to help you out here. I'm trying to do you a solid, you know. I don't know. Like I feel like sometimes we'll do things for other people that we won't do for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, when our divinity is important to us, sometimes that slight shift in awareness is really helpful to us really tapping into our inner truth because we recognize the source of it is not us and it's not selfish. Sometimes we think it's selfish what we want, when in actuality it's it's a gift from the universe that we can open and receive or be like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's always a choice. It's always a choice. We always get the choice whether we want to listen or not. Intuition will always be there.
Yeah.
But something I heard like when I was a child was like, God is not going to force themselves upon you. It's
Mhm,
just not how it works.
mhm.
Every relationship is a choice.
Okay, when you said that, I was thinking about like if it's all if it all comes from the universe, whether it's a mess or a beautiful tapestry, it's all reflective of the potential, right? It's all a manifestation of the potential. So we're off the hook. We get to do whatever we want to do,
Mhm.
right? But the way that I look at my intuition, this is really important. This just hit me like the way I look at intuition is intuition is showing me the purest way. intuition is showing me, like, if there's an infinite number of deaths and the versions of the life that I choose, because if there is, like, in today, I could choose 100 different ways to handle this day. But when I follow my intuition, it's like this purity, and
Mhm.
it's like the path to what's within me that wants expression in a way that's like, ooh, oh my gosh, like it's my higher self. It's the part of me that is the effervescent essence, the bubbliness of the universe at its like most. It's almost like the point itself. It's the moment of when I'm following my intuition. It has the biggest potential.
Mhm. Yeah. It's like, some people will describe it as like the golden thread,
Mm,
like following the golden thread. Like there are so many different potential path. There is an infinite number of potential paths we could take,
yeah,
but I want to follow the golden thread.
yeah,
I want that one. That's what I'm after.
yeah.
And how do we stay on that path? Intuition.
Mhm. I like that title. I want to follow the golden thread. That's like a movie. Yes, I want to follow the golden thread. That's beautiful. Do you have some other thoughts around this topic? I feel like I could talk for days straight. Um, I have a couple of other nuggets, but I also feel like that's a beautiful way to end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're gonna do this again next week, so
Okay.
we can pick up where we left off.
True. Thank
A
you.
special, yeah, thank you. A special thanks to Asheville artist Melissa Moss for our cover art. You can learn more about Melissa at melissamossart.com. And thanks to Cloud Cult for our intro and outro music from their song, There's So Much Energy in Us. Learn more about Cloud Cult at cloudcult.com. And of course, thank you for listening. And until next time, friends, peace, love, and light.